My story. Origin story. I was born in Uganda, Jinja. I was adopted from Uganda along with my older sister in 2006. I was about like almost 3. And then I lived in Wisconsin for a little bit. And then in 2007, my dad got a job here at Michigan State University. And so then we moved in 2007, the summer of 2007, here in Bath, Michigan, which is a small town 20 minutes north from like MSU campus. So all 5 of me and my siblings, we would do music lessons. We started at a very young age at the MSU Community Music School on Hagedorn Road. And so like in walks like 6 kids, and we're all like carrying our instruments. And sometime, like we all started on violin. And then the older we got, we're like, oh, we want to try out other instruments. And so my parents were like, okay, we can invest in that. So my older brothers would do like cello or viola. I stuck with violin. Some of us did piano. I did piano. And then the older we got, I would like incorporate more instruments. I'm like, oh, I want to learn that instrument. I was just very curious about music. It just was infused in me at a very young age. But then we did music lessons at the community music school, and I studied with Ann Kearney Lohman, doing violin with her for quite a long time. And then as I got older, I would just play on the piano. Actually, there was one time when I was at church, and there was a piano in our Sunday school room, and I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna play a song. And I came up with a song called Sunrise. I don't really know how it came to me. I was just like, oh, this is a nice tune. And then I went home because we got a piano too. And I'm like, Mom, listen to this song. And so I played it, and she's like, what is that? And I'm like, I don't know, it's like Sunrise. And she was like, I think you should do some piano lessons. And I was like, okay. And so that's when I started studying with Deb Hobart at also the MSU Community Music School at the age of 7. And then from there was, so the community music school has a program called Suzuki. That's kind of just how you are classically trained into playing the violin. And they would do these summer camps at Blue Lake, which is in Whitehall, Michigan. And starting summer, I think 2011, so I was about like 7 or 8. All my siblings, we'd go there, and there's just like this, about like a week, a couple of days, like not intensive, but just like summer camp where you could bring your families. It was just such a welcoming environment. And from there, I cultivated just this family of musicians and friends that I still am in contact with this day. And sometimes like they come over to the house and we still like jam out to music. But that was such like, music growing up was always like a hobby to me. And I was always just so curious about everything. And so when I was there, it's just like, oh yeah, we all just love playing music. We all just love just being there. It was just a fun experience. And one of those experiences, they have like, you have a private lesson where like everyone watches you perform a piece, and I played this piece, and one of the teachers was like, hey, we have this like honors concert. And at Blue Lake, I don't know if you know, but there's like this huge dorm. It's called Stuart Shell. And if you're invited to play for the honors concert, you just play your solo in front of everybody. And so I was about, I want to say 11 or 12, maybe 10. And she's like, yeah, like, would you like to play? And I was like, I don't know what that is, but sure, I'll play. And so like here, like with my little violin, I'm walking on stage. And I think that was just such a pivotal moment in music with Blue Lake and how that connects to like MSU Community Music School, because I never would have had that experience if my parents didn't put us all in music. And then going from there, hence like the creativity and just like wanting to do everything. Like if I saw a musical, I'd be like, I want to be a singer. If I saw a dancer, I'd be like, I want to be a dancer. I just wanted to do everything. Gymnastics, like I want to do everything. Obviously with 6 kids, my parents couldn't do everything. So we're like, how are we supposed to like hone down her skills? So as I got older, I was like, okay, I'm going to stick with music. Let's try that. But then in the summer of 2011, my older sister and I, she was also adopted from Uganda as well. Her name is Rhoda. We auditioned for the Broadway Annie at the Riverwalk Theater, just like right by the Capitol. And I didn't realize it was that close until I was like older. I'm like, wait, Riverwalk Theater, like Capitol, like it's so close. But we auditioned there, like not really knowing like where we would be in the role and stuff like that. And my sister auditioned, then I was like, it was my turn. I was like a little 8-year-old walking on stage, looked at the pianist going like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just gonna sing. And I was like, maybe far away and stuff. And I don't think I realized the potential that I had at that time. It was just more like free fall. Like, oh, this is what I do it for fun. And I got to be understudy for one of the orphans named Kate. And we would do these shows weekly like once we like had our training and like auditions. Oh, without sidetrack, that's another thing I love to do growing up is I always like to see the behind the scenes of like how things were created. So at Riverwalk Theater, once like the choir was done, we were also in the choir. The main leads and their understudies could like see the rest of the rehearsal. So I'd be sitting there seeing all these like talented artists from like the East Lansing area and just go like, man, they can sing so well, and like watch them organize like the rehearsal. And I was always just so curious about that. Mom, do you remember the guy's name who did directed? He had this like boisterous voice. Anyways, he was really great. He was like, man, you can sing. And he'd be like, smile. And I'm like, what is this? Like, I'm not used to this, but it was so fun. And I learned how to like choreograph and sing and like collaborate with like kids my age and just also have fun. I think that's part of the reason why I stayed with music is because I always had a fun learning environment. And one of those environments was at the Mid-Michigan Youth Symphony Orchestra, so it's called MMYS. And usually those rehearsals would take place on Monday nights at East Lansing High School, directed by David Larzalier, who's currently the band director still at East Lansing High School. But in middle school, I was like, man, like I'm in band, I'm playing flute, but I really wanted to stick with violin and do orchestra. But Bath Middle School is too small to have an orchestra. And so like my mom's looking around, she finds MMYS like, oh, like East Lansing High School, like everyone from the Michigan area, like Okemos, Hazlitt, or all that Waverly could like come together Monday evenings like after school to just play all this classical repertoire, meet other students from like different areas, kind of have that like networking. Even some of my friends from the community music school would come and do it as well. And I still talk to them too. And it was just always like a fun environment and very easygoing, but also just like you're still learning and like cultivating your like musical abilities. But yeah, I never experienced something like that big before because like compared to like Bath is very small. So it was a different experience. I was kind of like at the top of my game at Bath, but when I went to East Lansing, I'm like, oh, all of these people are really good too. So from there, like I'm going to the back, trying to observe the concert master, like see what he's like. I'm like, okay, what is he doing that I can do better? And David Larzalier was really good at just being direct in how he spoke to the musicians, make it fun, and then we'd do these performances, invite our parents and friends, and we actually sounded pretty good. So adopted from Uganda. So this past summer, some of my family members and I and people from my church got to go back to Uganda. It was a long time coming. Growing up, we're like, how are like 6 kids and like people from church supposed to go to Uganda? And like, how's that gonna work out? So then in 2020, we're like, okay, we're shooting for Uganda. There's about like 20 of us that were gonna go. COVID didn't end up working out. 2021, let's try again. Also didn't end up working out. So then like 2022, let's take a break. But then this past summer, we got to go and we were there for about 2 weeks in July. And for my sister now, we haven't been back for about like 17 years, almost 18 years, which is a long time. But when we landed, so there was like a lot of like, I don't know what's gonna happen. Like we don't really remember a lot. We were so young. So the only memory we have of the place is in videos, in pictures, like stories that my parents told us. My parents even wrote a book about it called The Invitation. So there's just a lot of like anticipation and nerves. Also just, it's such a different culture. So I'm thinking, Rhoda and I, we look like them, but we don't really know the culture as much. But when we landed and we got to like walk in the orphanage and just see the workers there, they're called mums. A lot of the mums that worked there, when my sister and I were there at a young age, still worked there, which was crazy. And so you're like, we're like making our own memories here. And so when you walk in, there's like all these little kids and they're taking their naps, and then the moms, they're working and cleaning. And we were like walking in. By the way, there's a lot of red dirt in Uganda. So we're like, oh, there's all this dirt and stuff like that. And there's like laundry hanging. And then there's this open space where there's like a table and like a cook. And so while they're cooking lunch and stuff like that, these little kids are like peeping, and you're just looking at them and just going like, or at least for me, I was just like, that was me. Like, I was 3, these little 2 or 3, and these little kids are like looking at us going like, oh, who's here? And then there's the moms, and there's like Mama Rose, Mama Jean used to downtown. Yeah. And Mama Stella. Mama Stella, she was my mama. So sometimes the moms they weren't like assigned specific children, but they were drawn to specific children. For like my sister, she had a lot of health problems. Growing up, like she was sick as a baby, had hydrocephalus. And then for me, I was born like prematurely. So their children coming in either come from abusive families or like are neglected on the street, or just a lot of like preemies born early. So there's like different rooms, and one of the first rooms we walked into was the preemie room. So like babies born, like I was 3 pounds and 6 ounces. So there's these tiny little babies, and like they're in their little cradles, and like some of the moms are like holding them, and just to be there was just like, man, this is so crazy. It just, I didn't really know how to experience it in the, like process it in the moment. Anyways, but like just to like see the moms again, and they're looking at us, and they remember us. They're like, Rhoda, Maria, and we're like, we remember you from pictures and photos, but like just the emotional connection to that after 17 years of not seeing them anymore, and then being able to reconnect, that was like one of the hugest takeaways that I'm still processing from that trip. It was just like, wow. But while we were there, we kind of came up with this thing where we would work on like coordination skills, and like encouraging them and affirming them a lot with what was like put in my upbringing as well, and just trying to like speak into their lives, because these kids have been through a lot. There was one instance where these 2 kids came in. Mama Mandy, she's the director at Welcome Home Orphanage in Jinja. And she was leading us around the orphanage, and these 2 kids were brought in, and they had like blisters on their hands because their grandma, they weren't supposed to eat, was it that story? They weren't supposed to eat some food, and their hands were tied together and like burned. So also there was a lot of kids with like damages because the parents abused them. And so they're coming in, and it's just like, wow, it's you don't really know how to process that sometimes, because like no kid should ever have to go through that, which is what Welcome Home does a really great job of doing. It's a place where kids are nourished back to health and loved. And in this case, like in my faith, it's a huge part, just knowing that they're loved by God. And part of my job there at Welcome Home was bringing music to them, because if you don't know Uganda, they like to dance, they have the drums, they have no idea what a violin is. So I brought my violin there. They had extra guitars, and we like put strings on them. I was kind of like the worship leader there. So being a kid who was adopted from Welcome Home, we would have them line up on these steps in like the little courtyard that they played at. And my mom would be like, okay, everyone, gather around. Maria's going to be playing some worship songs. And so we have this little kid who's like about 8 years old and still in the process of like being adopted. It's a long process. For me, it was quite short. So he's playing the drum. I have my violin, and they're all like, what is that? And I'm like, it's a violin. And there's also a language barrier too, because these kids are so young, so they only know Luganda and bits and pieces of English. But like music is a very cultural experience that like goes past language barriers. So I'm playing my violin, and they're like, whoa, and like trying to touch it, and I'm like, oh, don't touch it. But like you just see them light up inside. And there was one night when, after like we've been playing with the kids, like it's been a hot day, we're a little sweaty, a little tired, I pull out my violin, and they're like, oh my gosh, are you gonna like come and play your violin? I'm like, yeah. And I asked one of the kids to like play the drum. I'm like, hey, can you play a beat on the drum? And then I just start to improvise on the violin. And then all these kids start coming around, and the moms start coming around. And they're like, oh my gosh, Maria. And and I just start playing just this little fiddle tune while one of the little kids is drumming, and like everyone is dancing. My brothers got to be on that trip, my little brother and my older brother. And like they're dancing with the little kids. My mom is dancing. Rhoda's like holding one of the little babies. And it's just like you're looking around. It's just like, Rhoda and I used to be from here, and like we're sitting on the steps that like we used to walk on, and like this is a new generation of kids that we're probably not going to be able to see again. And the musical talents that I got to be like cultivated in and like gifted in and just grow in that, I could share that with them. And that was such a special experience to just like bring something that really cared so much to me and just give it to them in a way where they'll probably remember that for the rest of their lives. Even if they're really young, they'll be like, there was this like one girl who used to be from here who played the violin for us. And that was just so cool. I played this jig for the little kids, which they danced to, at Welcome Home Orphanage in Jinja, Uganda. This next song I'm about to play is dedicated to Maria from Welcome Home Orphanage in Jinja. It is How Great Thou Art.